When ancient laws speak of justice, what do they truly mean? Why does a single phrase, eye for eye, still echo across centuries of human thought? What did justice look like in the earliest legal codes preserved in the pages of the Book of Exodus? Was this command meant to promote revenge or to restrain it? Why would sacred law include language that sounds so severe to modern ears? What happens when divine instruction intersects with human emotion? Is punishment meant to mirror harm or to limit it? Who was this law written for? Victims? Judges, communities, or generations far beyond its original audience? What kind of society needs a rule that measures injury with injury? What fears were present in that ancient world? What conflicts demanded such precision? What chaos required such structure? Why does the Torah return to this principle again in the Book of Leviticus? Why is it emphasized once more in the Book of Deuteronomy? What changes when the same idea appears in multiple legal contexts? Are these repetitions accidental or intentional? Is this law reactive or preventative? Was it designed to escalate violence or to contain it? What does it reveal about how ancient Israel understood responsibility? How did this principle function inside real court cases? Was it ever applied literally, or was it primarily symbolic? Did judges actually remove eyes and break bones? Or does the text point towards something more measured? What does proportional justice really mean? How do you define fairness when harm has already been done? Can loss ever truly be repaid? Can pain be balanced? Can damage be undone? What happens when emotions demand vengeance, but law demands restraint? Why does the Torah place this rule alongside instructions about witnesses, compensation, and community accountability? What role does truth play in this system of justice? Why does false testimony receive such severe consequences? What does that tell us about the value of integrity in ancient legal thought? What kind of society collapses when lies go unpunished? What kind of society survives when justice is carefully measured? Is this law about punishment or protection? Is it about retaliation or limitation? Is it about anger or order? Why does the text focus so intensely on equivalence? Why is balance so central? Why does the Torah insist that consequences must match actions? What happens when justice becomes excessive? What happens when it becomes weak? Where is the line between mercy and chaos? Where is the line between discipline and cruelty? Who decides? What authority stands behind these commands? Why would divine law concern itself with broken bones, damaged eyes, and injured lives? What does that say about the value placed on the human body, on human dignity, on personal responsibility? What does it mean that every injury is counted, every harm acknowledged, every action weighed? Why does the Torah refuse to ignore even accidental damage? Why does it require accountability, even when intent is unclear? What does that reveal about moral responsibility? Is ignorance an excuse? Is accident exempt from consequence? What kind of justice system does not separate intention from outcome? And what kind of wisdom might be hidden inside that framework? Why are communities instructed to remove evil from among themselves? What defines evil in this legal context? Is it violence? Is it deception? Is it imbalance? Is it injustice? What happens when false witnesses manipulate truth? Why does the Torah demand that their intended punishment fall back upon them? What does that teach about power, about speech, about the danger of lies? How fragile is justice when testimony is corrupted? How easily can a legal system collapse when truth is treated lightly? Why is fear mentioned as a result of proper judgment? Why must others hear and be afraid? What role does deterrence play in divine law? Is fear meant to control behavior or to protect the innocent? What kind of fear produces wisdom, and what kind produces oppression? How does ancient law attempt to shape human behavior at its root? Why does it speak not only to actions, but to consequences? Why does it address both personal injury and social order? What happens when justice becomes personal? What happens when it becomes detached? How does the Torah attempt to balance both? Why does modern culture struggle so deeply with this phrase? Why does eye for eye provoke such strong emotional reactions today? Have we misunderstood it? Have we oversimplified it? Have we judged it through modern assumptions rather than ancient context? What if this command was never about revenge at all? What if it was about restraint? What if it was about preventing escalation? What if it was about protecting the weak from unchecked retaliation? What if it was about placing limits on human anger? What if it was about preserving life rather than destroying it? What if this ancient law carries wisdom that modern systems still wrestle with? What if its purpose has been hidden behind centuries of misinterpretation? What if justice, as defined here, is far more precise than we imagine? What if this command was not meant to inflame violence, but to end cycles of it? What if every word was carefully chosen? What if every repetition matters? What if every legal detail points toward a deeper moral architecture? What if this is not merely law, but a blueprint for accountability? What if it reveals how a society can survive conflict without tearing itself apart? What if it teaches that unchecked revenge destroys communities? What if it insists that justice must always be measured measured? What if this ancient command still speaks into modern courtrooms, relationships, and conflicts? What if it challenges how we define fairness? What if it exposes how easily emotions distort judgment? What if it asks us to reconsider what true justice actually requires? And what if, hidden inside these ancient legal lines, there is a vision of order that humanity has been struggling to recover ever since? What if eye for eye is not the problem, but the mirror? The phrase itself is short, precise, uncompromising. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. It appears in the legal heart of the Torah, embedded within carefully structured judicial instructions recorded in the Book of Exodus, echoed again in the Book of Leviticus, and reaffirmed once more in the Book of Deuteronomy. The repetition alone demands attention. Sacred law does not repeat itself casually. Every recurrence carries weight. Every restatement signals importance. Yet for many modern readers, this command feels jarring, harsh, primitive, almost brutal. It sounds like a rule designed to fuel retaliation, not restrain it. It appears to sanction violence. It seems to legitimize revenge. It feels incompatible with concepts of compassion, restoration, or mercy. But ancient legal texts cannot be approached with modern instincts alone. They must be read slowly, carefully, within their own framework, within their own moral architecture, within the world that first received them. Because this phrase does not stand alone. It is not isolated. It is embedded inside a much larger legal system, one that speaks of witnesses, judges, accountability, compensation, and communal responsibility. It appears alongside laws governing false testimony. It appears within discussions of accidental injury. It appears in contexts that address both intentional harm and unintended consequence. This is not street justice. This is courtroom language. This is structured jurisprudence. This is covenantal law, and that distinction changes everything. The Torah presents justice not as a personal right to retaliate, but as a communal obligation to maintain order. It does not empower individuals to take vengeance into their own hands. It places authority in legal processes, in elders, in judges, in testimony, in careful evaluation of facts. Every application of this principle is mediated through communal systems. Never private revenge, never impulsive response, always deliberation, always accountability, always proportionality. The mystery deepens when we observe how tightly this command is bound to the concept of equivalence. The harm done becomes the measure. The consequence mirrors the action, not more, not less, equal, balanced, contained. In a world without prisons, without modern forensic science, without centralized law enforcement, justice had to be visible, understandable, predictable, and restrained. Unchecked retaliation leads to escalation. One injury becomes two become 10. Tribal conflicts spiral, families fracture, communities collapse. Ancient societies understood this danger intimately. Violence multiplies when boundaries are unclear, so the Torah introduces limits, clear limits, measured limits, and it does so using language that is impossible to ignore. Eye, tooth, hand, foot, burn, wound, stripe. These are not abstract ideas, they are embodied realities. The Torah speaks in physical terms because harm is physical, loss is tangible, pain leaves marks. Justice, therefore, must engage real consequences. But the deeper question remains, is this command prescribing physical retaliation, or is it establishing a legal framework of proportional responsibility? Is it instructing judges to remove eyes, or defining the maximum penalty allowed for a given injury? The text itself does not offer philosophical commentary. It presents legal formulas, case-based scenarios, procedural outcomes, and yet its placement reveals intent. This law appears amid regulations designed to protect the vulnerable. It exists alongside commands safeguarding the accused from false witnesses. It is paired with warnings against judicial corruption. It is framed within covenant obligations meant to preserve social stability. This suggests that the purpose reaches beyond punishment. It points toward containment, toward balance, toward restraint. The Torah repeatedly emphasizes that justice must be impartial. The same law applies to native-born and foreigner, to rich and poor, to powerful and powerless. Injury does not become acceptable because of status. Truth does not change because of influence. Consequences do not disappear because of position. Every person stands under the same legal measure, and this principle, eye for eye, functions as that measure. It sets a ceiling. It draws a boundary. It prevents disproportionate response. It removes emotional escalation from legal outcomes. It transforms vengeance into adjudication. The law also places extraordinary emphasis on testimony. False witnesses are not merely corrected. They receive the penalty they intended for others. This reveals something critical about the system. Justice is not only about physical harm, it is about truth. Words matter. Accusations carry weight. A lie in court becomes an act of violence because false testimony can destroy lives just as surely as physical injury. So the Torah responds with equivalence. The intended harm returns to the deceiver, not as revenge, as deterrence, as protection for the innocent, as preservation of social trust. The text explicitly states that others will hear and fear, not terror. Moral gravity, an awareness that actions carry consequences, that justice is not negotiable, that manipulation of truth is intolerable. This introduces another layer to the mystery. Fear is not portrayed as cruelty. It is presented as a stabilizing force, a reminder that society cannot function without accountability, without boundaries, without consequences that match behavior. Yet modern readers often recoil from this framework. We hear eye for eye and imagine barbarism. We picture violence sanctioned by law. We assume regression rather than restraint. But the Torah does not glorify injury. It regulates it. It does not celebrate harm. It limits it. It does not encourage retaliation. It confines it to judicial process. And this tension forms the heart of the mystery. Why does divine law choose such stark language? Why communicate restraint through severity? Why express balance through bodily imagery? Why anchor justice in equivalence rather than abstraction? Why construct a system where consequence mirrors action so precisely? What does this reveal about human nature, about conflict, about the necessity of boundaries, about the fragility of social order? The Torah assumes that harm will occur, that accidents happen, that people act unjustly. That truth can be distorted. It does not present an idealized world. It legislates for reality. And within that reality, it builds a framework designed to prevent chaos. But whether this framework achieves justice or merely controls violence remains an open question. Is proportional punishment enough? Does equivalence heal wounds? Can legal balance restore broken relationships? Or does it simply contain damage? These questions linger beneath the surface of the text. They are not answered directly. They are left for generations to wrestle with, and that is precisely why this command continues to provoke debate, because it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. That harm demands response, that justice requires structure, that unchecked emotion destabilizes communities, that accountability must be visible, that mercy without boundaries becomes permissiveness, and boundaries without compassion become cruelty. Somewhere between those extremes lies the architecture of Torah justice. But where exactly? And how is that balance maintained? Is eye for eye the foundation of that balance, or merely its outer edge? The mystery does not lie in the words themselves. It lies in their function, in their placement, in their repetition, in their legal environment, in their moral implications, and in the uncomfortable mirror they hold up to every society that struggles to define fairness. This is not merely an ancient rule. It is a challenge, a framework, a confrontation with human impulses, a boundary placed upon vengeance, a demand for proportionality, a declaration that justice must be measured, but measured by whom, and according to what standard? Those answers are embedded in the text, quietly, precisely, waiting to be examined. And as we move deeper into the Torah's legal world, the question grows sharper. Is this command a license for retaliation or a safeguard against it? The journey into that answer begins with context. The command eye for eye does not emerge in a vacuum. It appears within a carefully constructed covenantal framework preserved in the Torah, specifically recorded in the Book of Exodus, the Book of Leviticus, and the Book of Deuteronomy. According to the Torah's own narrative, these laws were delivered after Israel's departure from Egypt, during a formative period when a recently liberated people were being shaped into a covenant community. The text presents Moses as the mediator of divine instruction, receiving legal and moral commands intended to govern every dimension of Israelite life. This context is essential. These laws are not introduced as evolving human customs or pragmatic social experiments. They are presented as covenant obligations, spoken by the Lord and entrusted to a people learning how to exist as a nation under divine authority. At this stage in the narrative, Israel is not yet established in the land. There is no monarchy, no centralized government, and no institutional infrastructure resembling modern states. The community is organized around tribal relationships, shared memory of slavery, and a newly formed identity rooted in covenant. Justice, therefore, is not merely administrative, it is theological. Legal obedience is framed as faithfulness to God. Social order becomes an expression of spiritual allegiance. Every judicial decision carries covenant weight. Within this framework, the Torah introduces detailed case laws. These are practical scenarios meant to guide real disputes, real injuries, and real conflicts. The principle, commonly summarized as eye for eye, appears precisely inside these legal sections. In Exodus, the language emerges in the context of physical altercation. Two men are fighting. A pregnant woman is struck. The outcome determines the consequence. If no serious harm follows, a fine is imposed. If injury results, the text declares life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. This is not abstract philosophy, it is courtroom instruction. The Torah presents a structured response to harm, where consequence is measured by outcome. The law does not empower individuals to retaliate, it establishes a judicial standard applied through communal authority. In Leviticus, the principle appears again within a section dealing with homicide, bodily injury, and sacred accountability. The text distinguishes between killing a human being and killing an animal. Human life carries the highest legal consequence. Injury to a neighbor must be repaid according to the damage inflicted. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Immediately following this declaration, the Torah emphasizes that the same law applies to both native-born Israelites and foreigners living among them. Justice is not stratified by ethnicity or status. The covenant community operates under a unified legal standard. In Deuteronomy, the formula appears in yet another context, this time addressing false testimony. If a malicious witness attempts to harm another through deceit, the judges are instructed to investigate thoroughly. If the accusation is proven false, the intended punishment falls back upon the liar. Once again, the familiar language appears: life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Here, equivalence governs not only physical injury, but spoken accusation. Words become acts, lies become legal violence. The Torah treats false testimony as a serious threat to communal stability. Across these three settings, a pattern emerges. The same principle governs bodily harm, capital offenses, and judicial deception. It functions as a universal measure of accountability. Consequence mirrors intent or outcome. Justice is framed through proportionality. The Torah also repeatedly emphasizes careful judicial process. Judges are commanded to inquire diligently. Witnesses are examined. Decisions are rendered publicly. The goal is not emotional satisfaction, but communal order. The text consistently warns against corruption, partiality, and manipulation of truth. This reveals something profound about the society envisioned by the Torah. Justice is collective. Responsibility is shared. Individual disputes are resolved within communal structures. The law is designed to prevent private vengeance from destabilizing the community. In a world without prisons or modern enforcement systems, unchecked retaliation could spiral into cycles of violence, clan against clan, family against family. The Torah intervenes by placing strict limits on response. The language of equivalence establishes a boundary, not more than the harm inflicted, not less when serious injury occurs. Measured, contained, predictable. The Torah also links justice to deterrence. In Deuteronomy, after describing the punishment of false witnesses, the text states that others will hear and fear and will no longer commit such evil. Fear here is not portrayed as terror for its own sake. It is presented as moral gravity, an awareness that actions carry weight and that truth matters. Justice, in this framework, is preventative as well as corrective. The repeated phrase, "remove the evil from among you," underscores that legal accountability is intended to preserve the integrity of the entire community. Lawlessness is not treated as a private matter. It is understood as a contagious threat. At every point, the Torah grounds these commands in divine authority. The declaration, "I am the Lord," appears alongside legal instructions, reminding Israel that justice reflects God's character. Obedience is covenant loyalty. Judicial faithfulness becomes spiritual faithfulness. The historical setting intensifies the meaning of these laws. A people recently freed from oppression are being taught how to live without becoming oppressors themselves. They are learning how to hold others accountable without descending into brutality. They are being shaped into a society where truth, restraint, and proportional response form the backbone of communal life. Yet the Torah does not soften its language. It speaks directly to broken bones, damaged eyes, and wounded bodies. It legislates for reality, not idealism. It assumes conflict will occur. It assumes harm will happen. It assumes truth can be distorted. And within that realism, it constructs a legal system designed to prevent chaos. The command eye for eye stands at the center of this system, not as an invitation to revenge, but as a legal boundary placed upon it. Still, the text does not explain itself philosophically. It does not justify its own structure. It simply presents the law, which leaves readers with an enduring tension. Is this formula primarily punitive or primarily protective? Does it prescribe literal bodily retaliation, or does it establish a ceiling on punishment? Is it a mechanism of justice or a containment strategy for human anger? Those questions are not resolved by historical context alone, but understanding where this command appears and how consistently it governs multiple forms of harm brings us closer to grasping its intended function. function, and that function becomes clearer only when we turn directly to the language of the law itself. The principle commonly summarized as eye for eye appears in 3 distinct Torah contexts, each with its own legal setting. To understand its function, we must examine the wording carefully and observe how the language operates within each passage. In Book of Exodus 21, 22, 25, the formula appears within a case scenario. The passage begins with a conditional structure. If men are fighting and they strike a pregnant woman and her children come out, yet no serious harm follows, the offender shall be fined according to what the woman's husband demands and the judges determine. The presence of judges is explicit. This is not spontaneous retaliation. This is adjudicated compensation. The fine is not arbitrary. It is evaluated and confirmed within a judicial process. Then the text introduces a shift. But if there is harm, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. The phrase functions as a legal response triggered by the presence of harm. The structure is proportional. The repeated preposition for establishes equivalence between injury and consequence, not escalation, not exaggeration, equivalence. The text does not specify the procedural mechanics of how this equivalence is implemented. It does not describe courtroom steps beyond what is stated. It does not explain whether this equivalence is literal bodily retaliation or judicially assessed compensation. It simply establishes the principle that consequence must correspond directly to harm. The list itself moves from life to specific bodily parts. Life for life stands at the highest level of consequence. Then the formula descends into specific injuries. The progression suggests gradation. The law recognizes varying degrees of harm and aligns response accordingly. In Book of Leviticus 24, 17, 22, the formula appears in a slightly different arrangement. The passage begins with homicide. Whoever takes a human life shall surely be put to death. It then distinguishes between killing a person and killing an animal. Restitution applies in the case of livestock. Capital consequence applies in the case of human life. After this distinction, the text broadens the scope. If anyone injures his neighbor, as he has done, it shall be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever injury he has given a person shall be given to him. The wording reinforces reciprocity. The phrase, as he has done, emphasizes mirrored consequence. The focus remains on proportionality. Immediately following this, the Torah restates equality under the law. You shall have the same rule for the sojourner and for the native, for I am the Lord your God. This addition is significant. The principle of equivalence applies universally within the covenant community. Status does not alter consequence. Justice does not shift based on identity. The law functions as a standard, not a privilege. In Book of Deuteronomy 19, 16, 2-21, the formula appears in a judicial context involving false testimony. The passage describes a malicious witness who rises against someone to accuse them of wrongdoing. The case is brought before the judges, who are instructed to inquire diligently. If the witness is proven false, the text commands, then you shall do to him as he had meant to do to his brother. Again, mirrored consequence. Intent determines outcome. The law targets premeditated harm. The passage concludes with the formula, your eye shall not pity. It shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. The phrase, your eye shall not pity, appears here in a judicial instruction. It does not encourage cruelty. It instructs judges not to allow emotional bias to override justice. Compassion must not nullify accountability when deception threatens communal integrity. Across these passages, several textual observations emerge. The principle is consistently embedded in legal procedure. Judges are present. Investigation is required. Witnesses are examined. Consequences follow evaluation. The formula never appears in narrative storytelling as a private instruction for individuals to execute revenge. It appears exclusively within judicial frameworks. The language is concrete and physical. Injury is described in tangible terms. The Torah does not speak abstractly about damages. It names body parts and wounds. This concreteness underscores the seriousness of harm. The repetition of body parts creates rhythm and emphasis. Eye, tooth, hand, foot, burn, wound, strike. The list communicates comprehensiveness. No category of injury is exempt from measured response. The formula also functions as a limitation. By defining equivalence, it implicitly forbids disproportionate retaliation. The maximum penalty corresponds exactly to the injury inflicted. The presence of capital consequence in cases of homicide establishes hierarchy. Life carries unique value. Killing a human being invokes the highest legal response. The law distinguishes between human life and property. Livestock can be replaced. Human life itself cannot. In Deuteronomy, the application to false witnesses reveals that justice is not confined to physical violence. Deception is treated as a form of harm capable of producing severe consequences. The law protects the accused from wrongful punishment by turning intended harm back upon the deceiver. The repetition of the equivalence formula in varied contexts suggests that it serves as a foundational judicial standard rather than a narrow rule limited to one scenario. The Torah does not provide narrative examples demonstrating the literal execution of bodily retaliation under this formula. The text offers legal principles rather than case outcomes. It establishes what justice requires, but does not record specific courtroom enactments of each scenario. This silence leaves interpretive space. However, what the text makes explicit is the emphasis on proportionality, impartiality, and deliberate adjudication. The formula's structure communicates balance. The repeated pairing of injury and consequence reinforces measured accountability. The inclusion of judges and investigation underscores due process. The equal application to native and foreigner highlights fairness. The warning against pity in judicial context protects against favoritism that undermines justice. Taken together, the textual details reveal a legal system concerned with structured response to harm. The Torah does not celebrate violence. It regulates it. It does not glorify injury. It insists that injury carries consequence. The principle of equivalence operates as a boundary line. Whether that boundary represents literal physical retaliation or a legal ceiling governing compensation is not directly explained within the passages themselves. What the text states clearly is this: harm demands response. Response must match harm. Justice must be measured, and no one stands above that measure. The deeper implications of how this principle functions, whether as literal mandate or legal limitation, require careful interpretation. But before interpretation, the text itself must be allowed to speak in its own terms, and in its own terms, it speaks of balance. Before drawing interpretive conclusions, it is necessary to return to what the Torah explicitly states. Within the legal material of the Book of Exodus, the Book of Leviticus, and the Book of Deuteronomy, the formula life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot appears in judicial contexts. It is presented in cases involving bodily injury, homicide, and false testimony. Judges are present. Investigation is required. Harm is evaluated. Consequence follows assessment. The text establishes proportionality. It establishes accountability. It establishes equivalence. It does not describe individuals personally enacting revenge. It does not provide narrative examples of literal bodily retaliation being carried out. It does not detail the procedural mechanics beyond stating the principle itself. Those are the textual boundaries. What follows are interpretive possibilities derived strictly from the internal logic of the passages. One reading takes the language at face value. The formula names specific body parts and injuries. The structure mirrors harm with identical consequence. Fracture corresponds to fracture. Tooth corresponds to tooth. This interpretation understands the command as literal reciprocity administered through judicial authority. In this view, the visible nature of consequence reinforces deterrence. Harm produces tangible, mirrored outcome. Justice is seen and felt in proportional measure. However, even under this reading, the involvement of judges and investigation prevents personal vengeance. The text repeatedly situates the principle inside courtroom structure. The consequence is not immediate retaliation. It is adjudicated response. Another possible interpretation understands the formula not as a mandatory prescription of physical retaliation, but as a legal maximum, a ceiling that restricts excessive punishment. The language defines the upper limit of consequence. No penalty may exceed the harm inflicted. The measured equivalence functions as a boundary against escalation. In this view, the formula protects against disproportionate response. It restrains human impulse toward overcorrection. It does not necessarily require identical physical injury in every instance. Rather, it prevents punishment from surpassing the original harm. The text itself does not explicitly clarify which of these mechanisms governs implementation. It establishes equivalence but does not describe method. It speaks of giving life for life and eye for eye, yet it does not narrate how that giving occurs in practice. Because of that textual silence, certainty must remain limited to what is stated directly. A third interpretive observation arises from the broader placement of the principle within the Torah's legal framework. In each passage, the formula appears in connection with communal stability. In Exodus, it follows a case of accidental harm within conflict. In Leviticus, it is paired with distinctions between human life and property. In Deuteronomy, it applies to false testimony testimony that threatens judicial integrity. The repeated use across these varied contexts suggests that equivalence is not a narrow rule but a foundational standard of justice. From this perspective, the formula functions symbolically as well as legally. The naming of body parts communicates seriousness. It communicates moral symmetry. It underscores that actions produce consequences proportionate to their weight. Even if literal application were not always required, the imagery itself enforces moral clarity. Injury is neither minimized nor exaggerated. It is matched. Another interpretive layer emerges when considering the repeated emphasis on impartiality. The Torah explicitly commands that the same law apply to the native and the sojourner. This suggests that equivalence serves as an equalizing force. Status does not mitigate consequence. Wealth does not reduce penalty. The principle levels hierarchy within judicial context. Justice is standardized. In Deuteronomy, the phrase, "Your eye shall not pity," introduces another dimension. The text instructs judges not to allow emotional compassion to override accountability in cases of malicious deception. This does not negate mercy in other contexts. It does, however, emphasize that justice must not be compromised by favoritism. The equivalence formula thus reinforces impartial application of law. It is also possible to interpret the formula as a deterrent mechanism. The Torah explicitly states that others shall hear and fear and no longer commit such evil. The visibility of proportional consequence serves to prevent future harm. Under this understanding, the principle protects the community by ensuring that wrongdoing carries predictable cost. At the same time, the text avoids presenting justice as excessive. There is no instruction to multiply harm beyond equivalence. There is no call to escalate. The mirrored structure implicitly forbids overreaction. The interpretive tension, therefore, lies between literal reciprocity and principled limitation. The Torah's wording supports the seriousness of consequence. Its judicial structure supports restraint. Its repetition reinforces foundational importance. What cannot be concluded from the text alone is that the principle encourages revenge. The passages consistently place authority in judges, not in injured individuals. Nor can it be concluded with certainty that the formula always required physical retaliation in every circumstance. The text does not specify procedural details sufficient to confirm that assumption. What remains clear is that the Torah defines justice in terms of measured equivalence. Harm must not be ignored, but harm must also not be answered with excess. The formula stands at the intersection of accountability and restraint. Whether understood as literal enforcement or legal boundary, its internal logic rejects disproportion. It rejects chaos. It rejects private vengeance. It insists on structured response governed by communal authority. And within that structure, justice becomes neither emotional nor arbitrary. It becomes measured, balanced, bounded. The deeper implications of that balance move beyond interpretation and into reflection, not speculation, but consideration of what such a framework means for a covenant community shaped by law. The principle of life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, does more than regulate injury. It reveals how the Torah understands justice at its core. Within the covenant framework of the Book of Exodus, the Book of Leviticus, and the Book of Deuteronomy, justice is neither abstract nor optional. It is embedded in daily life. It governs conflict. It shapes community survival. It reflects divine authority. The repeated structure of equivalence communicates something foundational. Actions carry measurable weight. Injury is not dismissed. Loss is not ignored. Deception is not minimized. The Torah assumes that wrongdoing destabilizes society. It introduces proportional consequence as a stabilizing mechanism. Justice functions not merely to punish, but to preserve order. This has theological implications. The law is presented as originating from the Lord. Legal instruction is not detached from divine character. When the Torah declares, "I am the Lord your God," immediately following legal commands, it ties justice to covenant identity. To administer justice faithfully is to honor covenant relationship. To distort justice is to undermine that relationship. This connection suggests that proportionality is not arbitrary. It reflects a moral structure embedded in the covenant itself. The distinction between human life and property in Leviticus highlights another implication. Human life carries singular weight. Killing an animal requires restitution. Killing a person invokes capital consequence. This hierarchy reinforces the inherent value assigned to human life within the Torah. The principle of equivalence does not flatten all harm into equal categories. It differentiates severity. This differentiation shapes the community's moral compass. Life cannot be replaced. Property can. Injury must be measured carefully. False testimony is treated as serious because it threatens justice at its foundation. When deception can produce wrongful punishment, the legal system itself becomes vulnerable. By commanding that intended harm return to the false witness, the Torah protects both the accused and the integrity of judicial process. This creates a society where truth is safeguarded, where speech carries responsibility, where words have consequence. Another implication emerges in the phrase, "Your eye shall not pity," in Deuteronomy. This instruction does not encourage cruelty. It guards against emotional partiality that undermines fairness. The judge must not allow sympathy to distort accountability when guilt is established. Justice requires steadiness. This balance between restraint and firmness shapes communal trust. If punishment exceeds harm, injustice occurs. If harm goes unanswered, injustice occurs. The Torah positions equivalence as the boundary preventing both extremes. The covenant community is therefore structured around predictable consequence. Members know that actions will be weighed. They know that retaliation cannot exceed injury. They know that false accusation will rebound upon the accuser. Predictability fosters stability. Stability fosters trust. Trust sustains covenant life. Spiritually, the law acknowledges human impulse toward escalation. Without limitation, injury multiplies. Anger intensifies. Conflict spreads. The equivalence principle interrupts that cycle. It imposes a stopping point, no more than what was done. This limit protects both victim and offender. It ensures accountability without sanctioning excess. It transforms vengeance into adjudication. Historically, within a society without centralized prisons or complex enforcement systems, visible proportionality would function as deterrent. The Torah explicitly states that others will hear and fear and will not commit such evil again. Fear, in this context, reflects moral seriousness rather than arbitrary terror. It communicates that actions carry real consequence. The community learns boundaries. Justice becomes educational. Consequences instruct as well as correct. There is also an ethical implication regarding equality. The Torah's insistence that the same rule applies to both native and sojourner underscores impartiality. Justice cannot fluctuate based on identity. The equivalence formula becomes an equalizer within the covenant framework. This is significant because it prevents legal hierarchy. The vulnerable are not subject to harsher consequence. The powerful are not shielded from accountability. Proportionality standardizes response. At the same time, the Torah's legal corpus contains provisions for restitution and compensation in other cases. The presence of fines and financial penalties in Exodus demonstrates that not every injury results in identical physical retaliation. The text itself includes varied responses depending on context. This reinforces that equivalence operates within broader judicial wisdom. The theological implication here is that justice is structured, not impulsive. It is designed, not reactive. It reflects order rather than chaos. Another reflection arises from the relationship between justice and holiness. Leviticus often frames legal instruction within the holiness code. Community behavior mirrors divine expectation. When injury is measured proportionally, the community reflects moral symmetry. Disorder is restrained. Violence is contained. Justice, therefore, becomes an expression of covenant holiness, not because punishment is celebrated, but because boundaries are maintained. The Torah does not depict justice as emotionally satisfying. It presents it as necessary. The equivalence principle serves as a protective fence around society. It guards against excess and neglect alike. In this framework, mercy is not abolished. The text simply does not center mercy within these particular legal scenarios. Its focus is on measured accountability. The absence of elaboration on mercy within these passages does not negate mercy elsewhere in the Torah. It simply indicates that these sections are concerned with judicial balance. Thus, the principle of eye for eye becomes a structural element within a covenantal legal architecture. It defines the upper boundary of response. It reinforces seriousness of harm. It protects equality. It deters deception. It stabilizes community. Whether understood as literal reciprocity or legal ceiling, its function remains anchored in proportionality. And proportionality reveals a deeper moral claim. Justice must correspond to reality, not inflated by anger, not diminished by favoritism, measured, deliberate, bounded. In this way, the equivalence formula shapes more than courtroom decisions. It shapes communal identity. It teaches that accountability is inseparable from covenant life. It reminds the community that stability depends on disciplined justice. And within that discipline, the Torah presents a vision of order that resists both vengeance and indifference, a structured balance at the heart of covenant existence. The phrase life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth has traveled across centuries with unusual intensity. It is short, It is direct. It is difficult to ignore. Yet when examined within its Torah setting, in the Book of Exodus, the Book of Leviticus, and the Book of Deuteronomy, it reveals itself not as an isolated command, but as a foundational legal principle embedded within covenant structure. It does not appear as a personal instruction to retaliate. It does not authorize spontaneous revenge. It does not celebrate violence. It stands inside judicial process, inside investigation, inside communal responsibility. The Torah presents a world where harm is real, where conflict happens, where deception threatens justice, where injury destabilizes community. Rather than ignoring this reality, the law confronts it directly. It establishes equivalence, measured consequence, bounded response, not more, not less, equal. Within that boundary, several truths emerge from the text itself. Human life carries distinct value. False testimony is a form of harm. Justice must be impartial. Status does not alter accountability. Judges must act without emotional distortion. Consequences must correspond to action. The repetition of the equivalence formula across different legal contexts suggests deliberate emphasis. The Torah is not improvising. It is constructing a stable framework, and that framework protects against two dangers at once: unchecked vengeance, unchecked injustice. If retaliation exceeds harm, society fractures. If wrongdoing goes unanswered, society erodes. The principle of proportionality stands between those extremes. It functions as a limit, a restraint, a safeguard. The Torah does not provide philosophical commentary explaining why this language was chosen. It does not narrate detailed examples of enforcement. It does not resolve every interpretive question regarding literal or compensatory application. But it does make one reality unmistakable. Justice must be measured, and measurement requires discipline. Within the covenant community described in these texts, justice reflects divine authority. The repeated declaration, "I am the Lord," anchors law in relationship. Legal structure is not detached from theology. It is covenant expression. This means that proportional justice is not merely practical, it is spiritual. To distort justice is to distort covenant fidelity. To uphold justice is to honor the structure established by divine command. The equivalence formula, therefore, becomes more than a rule. It becomes a mirror reflecting how seriously harm is treated, a mirror reflecting the value assigned to human life, a mirror reflecting the danger of deception, a mirror reflecting the necessity of boundaries. For modern readers, the phrase may still feel severe, but within its Torah framework, severity serves precision. The law defines limits clearly so that emotion cannot expand punishment beyond its rightful measure. In that clarity, there is protection. Protection for the victim from being ignored, protection for the accused from disproportionate response, protection for the community from chaos, protection for justice from corruption. The Torah does not pretend that conflict disappears. It legislates for reality. It acknowledges that people wound each other. It acknowledges that truth can be twisted. It acknowledges that anger can escalate. And into that reality, it inserts structure, measured structure, predictable structure, accountable structure. The command eye for eye remains one of the most discussed phrases in Scripture precisely because it confronts the human instinct for imbalance. We tend toward excess, toward minimizing our own harm, toward exaggerating the harm of others, toward justifying retaliation, toward softening accountability. The Torah counters those tendencies with symmetry, not emotional symmetry, legal symmetry. The final impression left by these passages is not brutality, but boundary. Not vengeance, but valuation. Not chaos, but control. Justice, as presented here, is neither uncontrolled wrath nor passive tolerance. It is deliberate, measured, covenantal, and deeply aware of human nature. As we close this exploration, one question lingers, not as speculation, but as reflection grounded in the text. What happens to a society when justice is no longer proportional, when harm is ignored, when punishment exceeds offense, when truth is negotiable? The Torah's answer, implied through its structure, is instability, and its solution is equivalence, measured accountability, bounded consequence. If this exploration has helped you see the Torah's legal world with greater clarity and depth, consider continuing the journey with us. The Scriptures often reveal their richness when read slowly, carefully, and within their own framework. Here on Secrets of Scripture, we remain committed to examining the text with precision, respect, and thoughtful reflection. If you would like to explore more passages through this documentary lens, you are welcome to subscribe and continue discovering the depth woven into the sacred text. The words are ancient, the questions remain alive, and the pursuit of understanding continues.